Hey, welcome back to another episode of 3D Sorcery. So I wanted to do a little bit of a conceptual art series, kind of like how I create my characters, going from initially kind of sketching out the initial concept to actually bringing it into Maya and actually using it as something that you can just have like a piece of reference art that you can start building your own model from. It's a multi kind of tiered process, but you know, I'm working on this new video game right now, and I figured as I'm starting to create some of these elements and conceptualize some of these characters, it might be a cool time to show you a little bit what I'm working on, but give you some insight as to how to create your own characters if you're using like an engine like Maya to do so. Typically what I'll do is, like before in that previous video, which I'm going to be continuing, by the way, I'm like super excited to show you. I've recorded a whole series on that, so working on that. We're going to get the other ones up soon. But I wanted to show you kind of my process on actually creating kind of low poly characters for my games. Essentially, you know, a low poly character is something that you could use not only for the games that you're working on, if it's like a retro game, but you can also use that model you're making as a base mesh. So if you plan on going AAA and doing something that's super high res, low poly models actually serve a pretty good purpose, I feel, because you can use them as a base mesh to then bring into something like ZBrush and use Dynamesh tools and subdivide it and do all kinds of crazy sculpting and stuff like that. Totally worthwhile to do that. But I feel like as a modeler, if you're interested in pursuing kind of like a career as a 3D modeler, you want to do, you know, all kinds of work as a 3D modeler, you need to learn the fundamentals. You need to know how to box model and create low poly stuff, and then you can kind of start jumping into the high poly realm. Once you have a really good understanding of that, the low poly scene is crazy. You could do stuff even in ZBrush with low poly. There's lots of low poly tools that you can then use to subdivide and go crazier with. Blender's got a ton of good applications for low poly tools. Low poly modeling really serves a really good purpose for every 3D artist. So with that being said, we're going to start off with the conceptual art. You can see here in Procreate. Here, we're going to load it up right here. So here in Procreate, this is where I just kind of like the last video, if you happen to catch that, about how I kind of conceptualize my levels. I use iPad to do all my work. It's just iPads are so killer these days for doing this kind of work. And I feel like, you know, I used to use a Wacom on the computer and do everything in Photoshop, but now it's just so much easier to sit there on your iPad and do this kind of work. So, you know, the idea is, obviously in this game, you're going to be fighting against kind of undead creatures and characters inside various regions in the Underworld. The first being this kind of bone-themed castle. I call it the ossuary. Inside here, there's going to be a lot of kind of really scary undead creatures and just gnarly stuff you're going to be basically trying to blow away with your arsenal of weapons that you have. And one of those is, I wanted to have these giant kind of undead guards with giant axes that just are just absolutely horrid and disgusting. A combination of bone and muscle and almost like an abomination, but maybe even a little bit, I don't know, a little bit more underworld-ish and scary. I love kind of like showing the gross factor, you know, so like having maybe like the abdomen open and maybe showing like, I don't know, part of their ribs or something like that. That's what this character is going to be, just super gnarly. Once we finish this up here, it's going to go inside of Maya. And inside of Maya is where we're going to take this artwork and actually build a simple kind of starter base mesh. And what that's going to do is give us a starting point so we can start creating, you know, all the details and all the nitty gritty for the model that you want to do. Now, this base mesh is just a starting point in this video. I just want to show you kind of like how I get started on creating it. And this would be the actual mesh that I'll use to fully flesh out the character. But I feel like it's good to have like a starter point. Like, how do you start with a video? You know, do your concept art, bring it into Maya, and then start modeling the character, right? So this would be like the basics, kind of like your kickoff point. And then from there, I'll do another video where we really get into the nitty gritty and the details and all that kind of fun stuff. We'll unwrap it, we'll paint it, everything. Just kind of like what I'm doing with the level design. I figured I'd do one with a character too, just to show you what I got going on. So hope you enjoy, check it out. So I wanted to show you kind of how I bring in my concept art into Maya. And it's pretty easy. Once you've created your concept art, like you saw in that drawing there, typically what I'll do is I'll just come into View, and then just go down to Image Plane. and select import image. Now, the one thing to note is I'm in perspective view, so if I try to do it here, it'll bring it in, but it'll take up the entire background, and you can't really move it around, which is kind of counterintuitive. I like to actually have it as an object in my scene. To make it an object in your scene, actually here, we'll just show you real quick. So if I go image plane, import, right? So see how it's just kind of like in the background, right? It's like a background object, right? It's there, but you're always kind of like modeling on top of it. Some people like that. I personally don't. So I'm gonna click that and delete it. I'm gonna go into my front view right here. Then we're gonna go view, image plane, open, and there we go. Now you'll notice, now that I go into the other views, we now have an object in our scene that we can work with to actually use as like a reference piece, right? So for me, you know, I'd probably line it up so his feet are more or less kind of at the ground level, and then use that as a nice little kind of reference piece for me to model from. Now, when I do low poly stuff, I'm not going to model the whole model right now in this video. I'll do another video for that, but just to show you like getting started, typically what I like to do is just start with the cylinder tool. So this one right here, let's go into the cylinder. And, you know, for low poly modeling, again, you know, the game I'm doing is a retro game. So it doesn't need to be like super high end, but you can still use low poly modeling to create high end characters. Typically by using, you know, after you make like the low poly model, you could use that as like a base mesh and then bring that into ZBrush, Dynamesh it, and then sculpt it like crazy, right? So this still kind of works for both. But what I do typically is get a cylinder like that, and I'll go into its cylinder settings, and I'll bring its axes down to like, for low poly, we'll probably do like 12. It's pretty good, right around there. And then increase its size a little bit, and let's put it up to where it needs to be. So there we go, right? So more or less where his torso area is going to be, like right there. And then we'll just kind of form it, right? So I'll just use the scale tool to kind of form it out to more or less kind of the width of the character right on there. It's not completely accurate, but close, right? Then I'll come in here, and then I'll say, you know what, give me some subdivisions on the height. So I'll go probably 6 or 7 subdivisions is pretty good just to get started. And what's cool is once you have this initial piece to start with, you've got a really good piece to start shaping out the initial kind of torso or section of the model you're trying to make. So typically what I'll do, go into my front view here, I'll just grab like an edge loop like that. You can just double click the edges in here. And remember, if you're in Maya, just hold down right click and then you can select what you need, go to edge. And I'm going to use the soft select, so press B on your keyboard to bring that up. And if you hold it down, you can kind of adjust the soft select range. But what's nice is when you have this initial cylinder, you can now just start adjusting its size, right? So I can be like, okay, I know this is going to be this big character, but, you know, let's just kind of adjust that size so we get more or less the silhouette of what we're trying to make, right? And I know this isn't 100% accurate. And I might even move that over. And of course, this is kind of like a 3/4 view of a character, but it'll work for what I'm trying to do. Something like that, right? And I'll come back in here. And then we can start forming out the top portion, right? So I can come here and say, hey, you know, we'll grab that piece right there, go into the front right here, B, and then just hold down Shift and start extruding out these little pieces. Right, so you can use the scale to kind of scale it in, right, bring it up, so I can add more of these kind of divisions or edge loops to really just kind of form out the initial shape of this character. Now this guy is probably going to have a head that sits, it's not really going to be connected, so I'm just going to kind of top it off right around there. Maybe one more, we'll do one more right there, like that. So that's a good kind of initial silhouette, right? I'll come in here, and then I'll say, with my soft select, now what I can do is I can kind of shape it and form it. So I can, you know, turn it so maybe it's more of like this hunched kind of back that he has, like that. Adjust that soft select, so if I need to bring it down a little bit here, maybe turn it a little bit more. Adjust that soft select a little bit more, turn a little bit more, right? Give me that good kind of hunched, arched back for this character if he's for sure gonna have it. And then just start kind of working on this silhouette, right? I can come in here, grab these pieces. There you go. And let's say that that's our initial kind of starting point for the character, right? Now, typically what I like to do, just like I was doing in the level design video, I'll just grab like a sphere and throw that into where the head's gonna be. So we'll say the head's gonna be like right there. Going to that front view, let's just make sure that's more or less where that should be. And we can hide that and just look at it. It's close. Right about there. And then what I can do is in your modeling toolkit, you have this little symmetry mode. You look at it over here. Symmetry. If we turn that on to our X, right, we can work on both sides of this little silhouette at the same time, which is super important when you're trying to get just the general symmetry of a character. You can go back and add, you know, asymmetrical details later, but, you know, initially you probably want to start symmetrically to kind of build it out. And so from here, I'll just start shaping out some of these little elements. So where his arms are going to come out is probably the next portion I'll work on. So you can see here, I'm kind of like just taking this little quadrant right here, and this is going to become my arm area. Now what's cool is if we go into, I think we can do it with circularize. We go into edit mesh, circularize. That kind of gives us the shape we need to start building out this arm, right? I can turn our soft select back on a little bit and just start adjusting ever so slightly these little areas right here. Maybe bring that up just a little bit so we've got like his top, his traps, right? And we've got the lower lats kind of bulging out right here. Now typically I'll push this in, so I'll come in here and I'll just push it in like that just to give myself a little bit of room for where that arm's gonna be right there. And then I'll start building out the shoulder element. But what's cool is when you circularize it, now you have this nice little segmented piece that's low poly that you can use to start building out these elements, right? So first things first, we'll build out the shoulder, right? So there's the top part of the shoulder. And I typically like to use 2 to 3 edge loops for each section. So the shoulder's gonna have, we'll say 2 for that. So we got 1, 2, right? We've got its base and then 1, 2. And then we'll come out here, all right, to the upper part of the arm. And then maybe I'll just kind of rotate that a little bit. So that's where the elbow is going to be. And shrink it down just a little bit too. Like that. And then we'll go 1. Kind of rotate that back. And we'll go 2. We'll rotate that back. 3. And this will be like where the kind of forearm part is, like that. Like so. Break it down. And remember, this is low poly, so I'm just thinking like just kind of general chunks, right? Not getting too crazy into all the details. And that arm might be a little big. So I might just use the soft select, and if that happens, just do that and just kind of bring it back, right? Bring it back a little bit, or increase the soft select, bring it back into the body a little bit. I think that's probably pretty solid. Maybe even adjust upper arm, lower arm pieces like that a little bit. That's good. Right there. I can already like start to see this character take shape. Now, when you're working on these characters, you want to make it a habit. You'll notice it looks kind of blocky. If you click on your model and then just go up to mesh display, soften edge, that will kind of soften out those little areas, right? So already that's looking pretty good from a really low poly mesh. I mean, we're less than 500 tries right now, and that's including this head hair, right? So the head, typically what I do is go in and I'd sculpt it using some of the sculpt tools in Maya, and then retopo over it to build a new head. And then the hands, that'll be a separate piece that I'll connect here, but this is just kind of showing you how to get up and running with your own piece. I'll get into all the details later. We'll come back to this one. But if I go ahead and cut out the bottom of this right here, this is kind of how I build my lower legs. So what you want to do is we want to create like a hip structure down here, right? So I'll select this bottom edge loop. I'm going to bring it out a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're just going to flare it out a little bit like that. Okay? Then I'm going to create kind of like a waistband that goes around like where the crotch of the character is going to be. I'm going to use these front ones right here, these front two edges to create it, but what we're going to start doing is pulling these closer to each other. So let's extrude that down. Pull it closer, extrude it down, pull it closer, and each time we do that, we're going to start like kind of pushing this in just a little bit. Nothing crazy. Just remember to use those same two edges right there. Bring it in. Alright. Like that. Bring it in, go that way. And you can just scale it. That'll kind of straighten out those edges when you do that. And if they're a little angled like that, you want to keep them straight. So then just use the scale tool to just kind of straighten those out a little bit. Alright, help kind of make that a little flatter right there. You see how I'm adding some space before the legs connect? And then this, eventually, as we start to come up, we can start increasing the size a little bit. Alright? Build that kind of buttocks area. And come here. And then all we have to do is we've got these two and these two. We're just going to literally select them both and then come in here to bridge. Boom. Now we've got kind of this nice little pocket on each side. Just like we had for our arms up here, now I've got the same kind of thing for my legs, right? But before I circularize this little area, what I like to do is just come in and just add a little bit more room down here. So I'm going to use my soft select and just try to shape this out as best as I can. Kind of like this. All right. Just as best as I can right here. And then I'll come into the edge right here. And then let's grab this piece right here. Just extrude a little piece out right here. This will be the piece that we actually circularize. We'll shrink that in a little bit like that. And then easy enough, we'll just come with the mesh. We'll go circularize like that. That gives us that nice little circle, right? Didn't do so great on this side. That's kind of interesting when I didn't do it, but that's fine. It's weird how it, let's see. Why didn't that do that? That's interesting here. Let's try it on that side. I don't know why I didn't want to circularize on the... Huh. Well, if that does happen, which it looks like it did right here, easy fix. All we got to do is go to our model. Sometimes Maya does that. It's kind of strange why it wanted to do it to one side but not the other. And so it's like, oh, I'm going to adjust it weird on that side but not this side. I have no idea why, especially when I'm in symmetry mode. Okay, so I'll turn my symmetry mode off, and I'll just take half the model right here. Half it, like there. And then we'll just grab the model again. So come here and go X. Alright. Let me pull that down just a little bit. Like that. I'm going to extrude that down. Let's rotate that guy. So it's a little straighter this time. There you go. Just like that. Bring that up just a little bit. You can kind of cinch that in a little bit so the waist down here is a little smaller. It'll just kind of help with uniformity. All right. So we'll come here. Make that a little bigger. Go down here. Let's build out the kind of knee structure. So we'll tilt that up just a little bit. Like that. Again, we'll come down here. Tilt that forward. Down here. Tilt that down. And we can build out the bottom of these legs. So come here. And I might need to adjust these legs a little bit. But he does kind of have these huge stubby legs, right? Which is fine. But we'll come up here. Just keep twerking and adjusting these little elements. Just tweak till you see fit. Come here. Might come in here. Bring those together, and you might need to just fudge a little bit with the scale tool. Alright. I'm thinking that this whole body might need to come down. Let's go to the front view. That's actually looking pretty good. It's not looking bad at all. Let's see. Let's see. Let's grab both of these and bring it up. Let's grab that too. There we go. So typically on the legs, what I like to do is kind of grab these knee area and just pull that forward a little bit too. And then these guys we can turn up. This will eventually become our foot and our ankle that we can work from. And if you need to come back and kind of adjust, you know, the back side right here, you can change that. You can adjust that. If you need to add in another edge loop, you can feel free to do that too. Come in here, add a mesh, we'll go mesh tools, we'll go insert edge loop right here. Let's throw another one in there. That'll kind of give it a little more flexibility when he's moving his legs around. Just adds that extra little bit of just some verts that can be flexed and pulled and stuff. But we'll start off with that. And he's much larger, so I think I'm gonna just really kind of bring out these sides here. There you go. He's gonna be kind of a gross character. I actually think I'm gonna bring his legs out too. There you go. So I think that's a good starting point for this. Again, I'm gonna go mesh display, soften edges. There we go. Great. So there's my starting point, right? I'm gonna make a whole video on actually just creating this entire guy, but there's kind of how I start with my simplistic base mesh, right? Start with a cylinder, pull out those different elements as you see needed, and then keep checking like your reference art that you bring in to see like, am I in line with what I'm making, all that kind of stuff. So I think this is a really good starting point to eventually get into this character and do stuff. But you know, this video is just kind of like starting your concept, right? Creating the concept art, bringing it into Maya, and then building kind of the initial model that you can work from to start creating like your big piece. Now, all of these other pieces will be like the head. Bring that up there. There you go. The head and on all the different elements that are going to be in here are going to be separate elements. So we'll have like the shoulder pads, even maybe like some of the body pieces, like this little kind of belt with bones and skulls, and then probably some of the organs hanging out and stuff like that. We'll carve into this guy and do a bunch of fun stuff. Maybe like the knee pads and other pieces will be separate pieces. So this will be a really fun character to do. It'll be super gross, but I love it. I love doing characters like that. But this is how I get started. I'm gonna start doing these like series videos because I think like bite-sized pieces is better, especially to help you with your own characters when you're building stuff. Now this is just my process. It's the way I do it. Been doing it for years, but just kind of want to show you how I do things, and you can kind of grab your own opinions from your own work as you create your own stuff. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this gnarly kind of bone undead warrior we created. Super kind of gnarly with the details and crazy, but I love that kind of stuff. Again, that's what we do on this channel. We do like horror and scary and monsters, and we'll get into some robots and kaiju and other stuff, but hope you dig it. You know, these techniques that I use, they've been around forever. People using them for years. You know, I've been using Maya for probably going on like 20 years these days, but it's really refreshing to get back in and start like building characters again and texturing them and kind of doing my own thing. So wanted to take you along this journey in the process. Hope you dig it. I'll be doing more videos like this. We'll continue with this one in another video and really start getting into the details and how I kind of take it to the next level and then paint it and all that kind of fun stuff. Kind of like the demon video if you saw that earlier. So thanks for watching 3D Sorcery. Hope you like these videos. If you do, please like and subscribe. Thanks everybody.